The lawnmower let out one final, pathetic sputter before dying completely. Maya Hartwell stood in the middle of her front yard, arms crossed, staring down at the machine like it had personally offended her. Smoke curled lazily from the engine, thin and gray against the sharp Vermont sky. She was wearing a faded t-shirt she'd bought specifically for this performance, along with jeans that had been artificially distressed at a boutique in Manhattan, though no one here needed to know that. She checked her watch. 11:14 a.m. He would be outside by 11:30. The file said so. Damon Carter kept a precise Saturday routine. Yard work before noon, groceries at 2, homework help with Aria at 4. 12 years of field reports had given Maya a near-encyclopedic knowledge of a man who had no idea she existed. Or rather, no idea she still existed. She crouched beside the lawnmower and gave it a helpless nudge, just as the sound of a screen door swinging open reached her from across the low wooden fence. "Hey, you need a hand?" Maya looked up. Damon Carter was exactly as the photographs had shown him, and somehow nothing like them at all. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn gray t-shirt with a small bleach stain near the collar. He had the kind of face that defaulted to calm, not cold, just settled, like a man who had made peace with most things and was no longer in a hurry about the rest. A dish towel was still hanging over his shoulder, evidence of an interrupted breakfast. "It just stopped," Maya said, injecting the right amount of helplessness into her voice. Not too much. She wasn't playing a fool. Just enough to be someone who genuinely didn't know the difference between a spark plug and a carburetor, which, for the record, she didn't. He came around through the gate without being asked. That was the thing about Damon Carter. Every report, every observation log, every second-hand account described the same quality. He didn't wait to be formally invited into a problem. He just stepped in. He crouched beside the mower, checked the fuel, tilted it slightly to look underneath. Behind him, the screen door swung open again, and a small figure appeared at the fence. Aria Carter was 9 years old, with her father's watchful eyes and a gap between her front teeth that she hadn't grown into yet. She studied Maya the way children study strangers they haven't decided about, openly, without apology. "Our neighbor before you never cut their own grass," Aria announced. "Aria," Damon said, not looking up. "It's true." Maya looked at the girl. "I'm still learning." Aria considered this for a moment. "You have really clean hands for someone who does yard work." Maya didn't have an answer ready for that. She hadn't anticipated needing one. That was the thing she was beginning to understand about the Carter household. It had a way of catching her off guard, and she was a woman who had spent a decade making sure nothing caught her off guard. She had paid private investigators 7 figures over 10 years to find this address. She had rescheduled board meetings, rerouted flights, rewritten her entire summer calendar to stand in this yard, in this faded t-shirt, beside this broken lawnmower. And somehow, in the first 60 seconds, a 9-year-old had already seen through her. If you're new here, this channel tells stories about real human connections that money can't buy and time can't erase. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Millfield, Vermont was the kind of town that appeared on maps but rarely in conversation. It had one diner, one hardware store, a public library that closed on Wednesdays, and streets wide enough that neighbors could see each other's porch lights from their own front windows. People here knew each other's cars. They noticed unfamiliar faces and remembered them. Maya had chosen it precisely because of that. In a town this small, proximity was inevitable. There would be no need for manufactured encounters after the first one. The geography would do the rest. She had leased the house next to Damon Carter's under a shell company, furnished it in 3 days through a local realtor, and arrived with 2 suitcases and a cover story. A writer, taking time off, needing quiet. The story was boring enough to be believable. No one asked follow-up questions about writers. Writers were people others left alone. The house itself was comfortable but unremarkable. Wood floors, a narrow kitchen, a back porch that looked out onto a yard she had no real intention of maintaining. She had stocked the refrigerator with the kind of groceries that looked like a person was trying. Eggs, bread, some vegetables that would go soft before she remembered them. She had placed a half-read paperback on the coffee table. She had left a pair of muddy boots by the front door. She had built the set. Now she was living inside it. The lawnmower incident had gone almost exactly as planned. Damon fixed the machine in under 15 minutes. A clogged fuel line, nothing dramatic, and refused the $20 Maya offered him with the ease of a man who found the gesture mildly unnecessary rather than insulting. He introduced himself simply, shook her hand, told her the hardware store on Clement Street carried parts for older mowers if she ever needed them. Aria, standing at the fence the entire time, offered no such pleasantries. "Do you have kids?" she asked as Damon was wiping his hands on a rag. "No," Maya said. "A husband?" "Aria." Damon's voice was patient but firm. "I'm just asking." "It's fine," Maya said. She looked at the girl. "No husband either." Aria absorbed this with the solemn focus of someone filing information for later use. "We have lasagna left over from yesterday," she said finally. "Dad makes too much every time." Damon gave a short, quiet laugh, not at the offer, but at the accuracy of it. "She's not wrong about the quantity." "I appreciate that," Maya said, "but I don't want to impose." "It's lasagna," Aria said. "It's not an imposition. An imposition is when someone stays too long after dinner. You'd just be eating." Maya looked at the girl for a long moment. 9 years old, gap-toothed and entirely serious. "All right," she said. "Thank you." She had not planned to go to dinner that first night. She had planned to establish gradual contact over 2, maybe 3 weeks. The broken lawnmower, then a borrowed tool, then a conversation over the fence, slow and methodical. She had a timeline. She had contingencies. She had a folder in her laptop labeled Millfield Protocol that she had updated 17 times in the past 6 months. None of it had accounted for a 9-year-old issuing a dinner invitation with the authority of someone twice her age. The Carter kitchen smelled like garlic and dish soap, and something underneath both of those things that Maya didn't have a word for, but recognized instinctively as the smell of a home that was actually lived in. Crayon drawings were pinned to the refrigerator with vegetable-shaped magnets. A small whiteboard on the wall listed the week's schedule in 2 different handwriting styles, Damon's blocky print and Aria's looping scrawl. A telescope sat in the corner of the dining room, slightly too large for the space, aimed at a window that faced the backyard. "Aria's," Damon said, catching Maya looking at it. "She's been working through the visible planets." "She's 9. She's been 9 for 6 months and she's already annoyed about it." He set a dish on the table. "She wanted to skip straight to the James Webb images. I told her to start with what she could see herself first." "He says it builds character," Aria said, appearing from the hallway with her hands newly washed and still damp. "But really, he just likes explaining things." "That's also true," Damon admitted. Maya sat down. She hadn't expected to feel comfortable. She had not built comfort into the plan. Later, walking back across the yard in the dark, she replayed Aria's question from the afternoon. "You live alone? Aren't you scared?" She had smiled and given some light deflection, something about liking the quiet. But the question had landed somewhere it hadn't been invited. Maya Hartwell had a 12-room apartment in Chicago, a driver, a personal security detail, and an assistant who pre-screened her emails. She had not been physically alone in years. But Aria hadn't been asking about physical solitude. Children rarely were. The following week, Maya established what the file had described as Damon's pattern, but what she now understood firsthand. He was a man who helped because it didn't occur to him not to. The stuck window latch, the circuit breaker she claimed not to understand, the recycling bins she put out on the wrong day. Each small failure was met with the same uncomplicated steadiness. He showed up, he fixed it. He didn't make her feel like an imposition, and he left without lingering. He was nothing like the men she negotiated with in boardrooms. Those men helped when it served them. Damon Carter helped the way other people breathed. By the end of the week, Maya had pushed back her Chicago calendar by 3 weeks, then 4. Her assistant Patrick sent a carefully worded email asking if everything was all right. "Everything is fine," she wrote back. I need more time. Patrick, who had worked for her for 8 years and had survived 4 product launches and a hostile acquisition attempt, did not push further. He had learned to recognize the tone. On Thursday evening, standing at her kitchen window with a cup of coffee she had made badly, Maya watched the light in Damon's study click on. Through the window, she could see him at his desk, grading papers, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead the way the file had noted. Aria's room light was on too, the faint blue glow of a desk lamp. Their small, ordinary evening playing out in 2 lit rectangles against the dark. He had no idea she was watching. He had no idea she had been watching, in one form or another, for 10 years. She had told herself this was about debt, about the clean, simple act of returning something that had been taken from someone without their consent. She had told herself she was precise, she was methodical, she was someone who finished what she started. She turned away from the window and did not let herself look back. Maya burned the eggs on Monday morning, not in the dramatic smoke alarm way she had manufactured for the lawnmower, genuinely, quietly, because she had been reading a Q3 earnings report on her phone and simply forgot that eggs required attention. She stood at the stove, scraping blackened edges into the sink, and was struck by the absurd realization that she had not personally cooked a meal in approximately 4 years. She made toast instead. She ate it standing at the counter, looking at nothing in particular, and thought about the board presentation she had postponed by another week. Patrick had stopped sending carefully worded emails. He had started sending bullet points, which was his version of distress. She wrote back, "Handle the Mercer account. Push the Thursday call to Monday. I'll be back when I'm back." Then she put the phone face down on the counter and finished her toast. Outside, the morning was clear and loud with birds. Through the kitchen window, she could see the maple tree at the edge of the Carter yard, fat with late summer leaves. She could hear, faintly, Aria's voice, cheerful and persistent, narrating something to a largely silent audience, which was presumably Damon. Maya rinsed her plate. She had a broken gutter to report. The gutter brought Damon over at noon with a ladder and a pair of work gloves. He fixed it in 20 minutes, found a secondary issue at the corner joint, fixed that too, and came down to find Maya holding 2 glasses of lemonade she had made from a packet she'd found in the back of the cabinet, which tasted approximately like lemon-scented ambition. Damon drank it without comment. This was something she had come to appreciate about him. He didn't perform politeness. If something was good, he said so. If something was unnecessary, he simply didn't acknowledge it. The lemonade was unnecessary. He drank it anyway. "You're not writing," he said. Maya looked up. "Sorry?" "You said you came up here to write." He nodded toward the house. "I've never seen you with a notebook. Or a laptop. Outside, I mean." She had underestimated him. She had read the files, tracked the years, and somewhere in that process, she had made the quiet, arrogant mistake of assuming that because Damon Carter lived a small life, he wasn't paying attention. "I write better indoors," she said. He looked at her for a moment, not suspiciously, just with the mild, steady attention of someone who was used to waiting out incomplete answers. "Fair enough," he said, and handed back the glass. The science project arrived on a Wednesday. Aria appeared at Maya's door at 4:15 with a trifold cardboard display board under one arm and a plastic bag of craft supplies in the other hand. Behind her, Damon stood on the porch with the expression of a man who had been informed of this plan approximately 5 minutes ago. "Dad says I have to ask first," Aria said. "So I'm asking." "What are you asking?" Maya said. "If you'll help me with my project. It's on refraction." She held up the bag. "I have prisms." Maya looked past her at Damon. He gave a small, helpless shrug, the universal gesture of a parent who had learned which battles were worth having. "Come in," Maya said. Before they started, Aria pulled out a small notebook and looked at Maya with complete seriousness. "Can I have your number? In case I have questions about the project later and Dad's busy." She held up the notebook. "I write everyone's number down. It's how I stay organized." Maya looked at the notebook, spiral-bound, covered in sticker stars, entirely sincere, and gave the girl her number. For the next 2 hours, Maya Hartwell, who had closed a $40 million acquisition at 31, who had testified before a Senate subcommittee on artificial intelligence, who had been on the cover of 3 business magazines in the last fiscal year, sat cross-legged on the floor of her kitchen, helping a 9-year-old glue prism diagrams to cardboard. The glue went on wrong. The diagrams were slightly crooked. Aria insisted on drawing light rays by hand in 6 different colors, which took considerably longer than the printed version would have. Maya held the board steady while Aria drew, and said nothing about the fact that the yellow ray and the orange ray were essentially indistinguishable. "You're not fixing it," Aria observed. "You didn't ask me to fix it." Aria considered this. "Most adults just fix things without asking." "I know," Maya said. "It's a bad habit." The girl looked at her with those watchful eyes, the ones that had seen through her clean hands on the very first day. Then she went back to drawing her light rays, satisfied with something she hadn't named. Maya didn't notice Damon in the doorway until Aria said, without looking up, "Dad, stop hovering." He stepped inside, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, watching the two of them on the floor. He didn't say anything, but Maya caught his expression in the brief moment before she looked away, something careful and quiet and not entirely guarded, and felt something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with strategy. The dinner happened the following Saturday. It was Maya's invitation this time, a chance to deepen the level of domestic familiarity she had told herself when she extended it. She spent 4 hours preparing a meal she had looked up online that morning and produced something that was, by reasonable standards, edible. Aria ate 2 helpings without being asked. Damon said it was good and appeared to mean it. After Aria had disappeared to a room with a book, the table settled into the comfortable quiet of people who no longer needed to fill silence to justify each other's company. Maya poured more wine. Outside the window, Millfield was doing what Millfield did in the evenings, going dark slowly, no rush. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Damon looked up. "You have a master's degree in molecular biology." She kept her voice neutral, framed it like idle curiosity. "How did you end up teaching middle school science in Vermont?" He was quiet for a moment, not evasively, more like a man who had answered this question before and was deciding which version to give. "I was a doctoral candidate," he said. "University of Michigan. Had a full research fellowship." He turned the wine glass slowly in his hand. "Didn't finish." "What happened?" He looked at the table. Not reluctant, just organizing the words. "There was an accident. Off Route 9 outside of Kalamazoo. A woman's car went off the road into a creek in February. Water was bad that time of year." Maya's hand was very still on the stem of her glass. "I was driving behind her," Damon continued. "I stopped, got her out." He paused. "I was in the water longer than I should have been. Did some nerve damage in my right hand. Lost about 8 months to recovery and physical therapy. By the time I could work at full capacity again, my funding window had closed and my advisor had taken on someone else." He said it plainly, without theater. That was it. The room was very quiet. "I'm sorry," Maya said. The words were both completely inadequate and the only honest thing she had said to him in weeks. He shook his head. "I'm not. I mean that." He looked up and there was nothing in his face that resembled self-pity. "I don't know what happened to her. The woman in the car. I never found out. But I've thought about it a lot over the years and I keep landing in the same place." He gave a small, quiet smile. "I hope she's doing something that mattered. I hope it was worth it for her. That's all I ever wanted to know." Maya set her glass down carefully. She knew exactly what had happened to the woman in the car. She knew what she had built, what she had earned, what her name was worth in rooms that Damon Carter would never have reason to enter. She knew the precise dollar figure of what his 8 months of nerve damage and lost fellowship had cost him. She had had an analyst run the numbers 2 years ago, projecting his potential research career against industry averages. She knew all of it, and she sat across from him in her small, rented kitchen and said nothing. 3 days later, Aria got sick. It came on fast, a fever that appeared by afternoon and climbed through the evening. Damon had a mandatory parent-teacher conference he had already rescheduled twice and no one else nearby to call. He knocked on Maya's door at 6:30 with an expression that didn't ask for help so much as wonder if it was possible. "Go," Maya said. "I've got her." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him weighing it, the logical side, which said she was a neighbor he'd known for 3 weeks, against whatever instinct had developed over those weeks that she hadn't fully registered as meaningful until right now. 2 hours, he said. 3 at the most. "Go, Damon." Aria was in bed with a cold cloth on her forehead, running a temperature of 101 and utterly disinterested in sleeping. Maya sat in the chair by the bed while the girl drifted in and out, occasionally asking questions that had no logical connection to each other. About prisms, about whether fish could see stars, about whether Maya had ever been to Alaska. Around 9 o'clock, Aria's eyes were half closed and her voice had gone slow and soft. "Dad smiles more," she said. Maya looked up from the book she was pretending to read. "What?" "Since you moved in." Aria's eyes were nearly shut. "He used to smile mostly just at me. Now he smiles at other stuff too." Maya didn't say anything. "He was sad for a long time," Aria continued, her voice dropping toward sleep. "He doesn't say so, but I know." She was quiet for a moment. Maya thought she'd fallen asleep, then, "I'm glad you're here." Aria's hand had drifted to the edge of the blanket. Without thinking, Maya reached out and held it, lightly, the way you hold something you're afraid of wanting. She sat in the dark of a 9-year-old's room and understood, with the kind of clarity that arrives without warning, that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. She had come here to discharge a debt. Clean, measurable, finite. She had not planned for Aria's gap-toothed directness, or Damon's unhurried steadiness, or the way this house felt like something she had not lived near in so long she'd forgotten it had a name. She had not planned for any of this to feel like something she could lose. The suspicion began quietly, the way most damage does. The following week, Damon stopped by to return a book Aria had borrowed and found Maya standing at the kitchen counter with her phone to her ear, speaking in the flat, clipped cadence she used for board calls, a voice that bore no resemblance to the one she used in Millfield. She ended the call the moment she saw him and smiled. He smiled back, but something had shifted. She saw it over the next several days in small accumulations. The way his eyes moved to her phone when it lit up with a contact she'd labeled only with initials. The way he noted, without commenting, that her car had been parked in exactly the same position for 2 weeks, suggesting she was being driven somewhere in another vehicle. The way he looked at her hands again, the way Aria had, and then looked away. He didn't ask. That was the thing about Damon Carter. He had the patience to wait, and the dignity not to push. But the question was living in the space between them now, and Maya could feel it growing. She told herself it didn't matter. She was close enough to the plan's end that she could manage the remaining distance. She updated the Millfield protocol folder and added a note, "Accelerate resolution timeline." Separately, in a different folder, one she had never labeled with a project name, she had begun quietly working with a trust attorney in Burlington to finalize the deed and funding endowment for a research center she had spent 14 months building in Damon's name. It was not yet complete. She had told herself she would present it at the right moment, when the truth was already on the table and the gesture could not be mistaken for a transaction. She had not yet found the right moment. She had been careless with the file. That was the only explanation. In 10 years of precision, she had been careless once, and once was all it took. Damon had come by that afternoon to drop off Aria's jacket, which Maya had washed and forgotten to return. Maya had let him in, then stepped outside to check on something at the back of the yard. Inside, Damon set the jacket on the entryway table and glanced toward the study. The door was half open, and on the desk, visible from the hallway, a manila folder lay open beside a stack of papers. It had been left that way when Maya had been reviewing it that morning and was pulled away by a phone call. He hadn't meant to look. But the photograph on top was 8 by 10, taken from across the street, and it was a photograph of himself. He was still holding it when Maya came back inside. The folder was open. He was standing at the desk. She stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. She watched him look back down at the photograph, then at the folder. at the structured tabs she had organized by year. 12 years of documentation, of surveillance, of methodical tracking. She watched him understand what he was looking at. When he looked up again, his face was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was closed. "I want you to leave," he said. "Not today. Now." "Damon, I don't know what this is." His voice was level, which cost him something, she could see that. "A research project, a charity case. I don't know what we are to you, but I know what this is." He set the photograph down on the desk, flat, and stepped back. "Please leave." There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. She left. Chicago received her the way it always did, without sentiment. The skyline materialized through the plane window at dusk, all glass and in different geometry, and Maya sat with her carry-on in the overhead bin and her hands folded in her lap and told herself that this was correct. This was the natural conclusion of a plan that had overextended itself. She was back where she functioned. She would recalibrate. Patrick met her at the office the following morning with a stack of materials, genuine relief, and the good sense not to ask where she'd been. The Mercer account was in order. The Thursday call had been successfully moved. There were 3 items requiring her signature and 1 requiring her direct attention before end of week. She signed the 3 items. She sat down with the 4th. By noon, she had made 4 decisions, returned 9 calls, and resolved a dispute between 2 department heads that had been escalating for 2 weeks in her absence. She ate lunch at her desk. She approved a budget revision. She reviewed the Q4 projections and noted 2 areas of inefficiency she wanted addressed before the next board meeting. She did all of it correctly. At 3 o'clock, she stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her 41st floor office and looked out at the city she had built her name into. And the thought that arrived, quiet and stubborn and entirely unwelcome, was this. He said he hoped it was worth it for her. That was all he ever wanted to know. She pressed her fingers to the glass. He had lost 8 months, a fellowship, a career trajectory he had spent years earning, and the only thing he had ever asked from the universe in return was that the woman he'd pulled from a frozen creek had gone on to do something that mattered. She turned back to her desk. The Q4 projections were still on the screen. The numbers were good. They had always been good. She sat down and for the first time in a decade looked at her own work and couldn't answer a 9-year-old's question. "Aren't you scared?" The board presentation was scheduled for Thursday at 2. At 12:40, Patrick knocked on her open door and told her the room was ready. The materials were printed, and the Hargrove representatives had arrived early and were being held in the 3rd-floor conference room with coffee. "Push it," Maya said. Patrick blinked. "The presentation?" "Give them my apologies. Reschedule for next week. Tell them I have a prior commitment." "You don't have a prior commitment." "I do now." She was already reaching for her phone. "Book me on the next flight to Burlington." Patrick had survived 4 product launches and a hostile acquisition attempt. He looked at her for a moment, then said, "I'll get the car." She found out about the science fair the same night she landed. Settled into her Burlington hotel room, she had arrived too late to drive to Millfield and too unsettled to sleep. She was staring at the ceiling when her phone lit up with a text from a number she recognized as Aria's. The girl had used it exactly once before, to send Maya a photo of the finished project board with no caption and a single star emoji. This time there were 3 messages, sent a minute apart. "It's this Saturday, the project we made." Then, after a pause long enough that Maya had assumed the conversation was over, "I want you to see it." Maya read them 4 times. She didn't respond that night, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she was afraid of saying the wrong thing, and she had already said enough wrong things to last a considerable while. She drove to Millfield in the morning, alone in the Subaru with nothing prepared. The Millfield Elementary Gymnasium smelled like crepe paper and industrial cleaning solution. Trifold display boards lined folding tables in 2 long rows, hand-lettered with titles that ranged from ambitious to optimistic. The effects of music on plant growth. Can magnets generate electricity? Why do leaves change color? Aria's board was at the far end of the 2nd row. The bending of light, understanding refraction. The light rays were still 6 different colors. The yellow and orange were still functionally indistinguishable. A small prism sat propped at an angle in front of the board, catching the overhead gym lights and throwing a fractured rainbow across the white tablecloth. Arya saw her from across the room and lifted a hand, restrained in the way of children trying to appear dignified in public. Maya crossed the gymnasium. "You came," Arya said. "I came." The girl looked at her with those watchful eyes. "Dad doesn't know you're here." "I know. Are you going to talk to him?" Maya looked at the small rainbow on the tablecloth. "Yes, but not to explain myself. I think he's heard enough explaining." Arya considered this with the seriousness she applied to most things. "He's by the water table," she said. "Left side." Damon saw her before she reached him. He was standing with a paper cup of coffee talking to another parent, and when he looked across the gymnasium and found her there, in the same faded t-shirt carrying nothing, accompanied by no one, something moved across his face that was gone before she could name it. He said something brief to the other parent and stepped away. They met in the narrow space between 2 display tables. Around them, children were explaining their projects to distracted adults, and the gymnasium was full of the specific noise of many small conversations happening at once, which had the effect of making their silence feel contained and private. "Damon," she said, "I'm not here to justify the file, or the surveillance, or the way I came here. There isn't a version of that I can explain that makes it right. I know that." He said nothing. He held his coffee cup and waited. 10 years ago, in February, outside Kalamazoo, you pulled someone out of a car in a creek. She kept her voice level, not because she wasn't feeling anything, but because she had learned a long time ago that feelings delivered without control were for her own benefit, not the listener's. And this moment was not about her benefit. "That was me. I'm the person you pulled out." The gymnasium moved around them. Somewhere to the left, a child knocked something over and a parent said, it's okay," in quick succession. Damon looked at her. His expression had not changed so much as deepened, like a room that reveals more the longer you stand in it. "I woke up in the hospital 2 days later," Maya continued, "and by the time I found out what it had cost you, you were already gone. No forwarding information. I could have found you earlier. I had the resources, but I told myself I needed to wait until I had something worth giving back." She looked at her own hands. "I spent 10 years building something proportional." She paused. "There's a research center in Burlington. It's been in development for 14 months, held in a private trust. The deed is in your name. The funding endowment covers 20 years of operations and a full research staff. You don't have to accept it. I'm not asking you to. Not today. Not like this. I just needed you to know it exists. And why." She looked up. "That's everything," she said. "That's all of it." Damon was quiet for a long moment. Then he set his coffee cup down on the edge of the nearest table and walked past her, through the gap between the display boards and out the side door of the gymnasium. Maya stood where he'd left her. The science fair continued around her, undisturbed. Across the room, Arya was standing very still behind her display board, pretending with great effort not to be watching. Maya waited. Outside, Damon stood in the narrow strip of shadow beside the gymnasium wall. He turned the thing over in his mind the way he turned difficult things, carefully, without rushing to a verdict. She had followed him for 10 years, documented him, moved in next door under a manufactured identity, sat at his kitchen table and listened to him tell the story of what he'd lost without saying a word. That was real. The breach of it was real, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. And yet, he kept returning to the floor of her kitchen, to the image of a woman who ran a company valued at over $2 billion, sitting cross-legged on linoleum, holding a cardboard display board steady while Arya drew indistinguishable light rays. Not performing patience, not managing a situation, just holding the board. He thought about the night Arya was sick. He had come home to find Arya asleep and Maya in the hallway outside the bedroom door, not wanting to wake her. She hadn't mentioned it. She had handed him a quiet update on the fever, told him it had broken at 10, and gone back across the yard without asking for anything in return. He thought about what Arya had said, half asleep in the dark, in the honest way of children who don't know they're saying anything important. He smiles more. He stood in the shadow of the gymnasium wall until he had held all of it long enough to know what he thought. Then he went back inside. Maya was standing where he'd left her. She didn't move toward him. She had done what she came to do, and whatever came next was not hers to engineer. Damon stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a moment. The real her, or the closest thing to real that 10 years of careful distance had finally made possible. "Did you actually read about refraction?" he said quietly. "Or did you just hold the board?" Maya blinked. "I looked it up afterward." Something shifted in his face. Not absolution. Not yet, and she wasn't asking for it yet. But a door, opening by a few degrees, in the way of a man who moves slowly and means it when he does. "Come see the project," he said. "She's been waiting to explain the prism to someone who'll actually listen." He didn't wait for her answer. He turned and walked toward Arya's table, and Maya stood still for one more second, just breathing, before she followed. Arya's rainbow was still spread across the white tablecloth when they reached her. Small, crooked, made of light passing through a cheap plastic prism and landing wherever it wanted. Nothing like what you'd design on purpose. Arya looked at her father, then at Maya. Then, apparently satisfied with whatever she saw, she picked up the prism, held it toward the light, and began. "So," she said, "refraction is what happens when light moves from one thing into another thing, and it bends." Maya looked at the small spectrum on the cloth. "It doesn't break," Arya continued, with the quiet authority of someone who had thought about this carefully. "It just changes direction, because the medium changed." She tilted the prism slightly. The rainbow shifted across the tablecloth. "That's all it is." Maya stood beside Damon Carter in front of a crooked science project they had built on the floor of a kitchen neither of them had planned to share, and watched the light bend. The research center could wait. The trust documents could wait. The long, slow work of rebuilding something that had been handled carelessly, that would take time, and she knew it. And for once in her life, she was not in a hurry. Some things couldn't be acquired. They could only be earned, quietly, the way Damon had always known. By showing up when someone needed you, without being asked, and staying until the work was done. Damon gave everything he had for a stranger, not because he expected anything back, but because it was the right thing to do. And that single act of grace shaped 2 lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. Sometimes the people who change our lives never even know they did it. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and come back. There are more stories like this one waiting for you here.